那接下来的议程比较特别，它是一个远距议程。那我们的这一位讲者，他其实人在日本，那他是一名巴西裔的工程师。那这边的话，他已经我先把他精彩的议程录制起来，那等一下会放给大家，不用担心我们的投影片都是中文的，所以相信大家可以理解他的那个精妙的内容哦。好，那接下来的议程的内容是真的比较特别一点，因为这个主题讲到所谓的冲刺计划。那其实大型组织要实践所谓的 Sprint 往往会遭遇到一些挑战，而且我们的讲者来自日本，日本这个国家它的规则又特别的繁多，所以所遭遇到的障碍又会更加的复杂。那今年因为 COVID-19 的影响，这位讲者他透过有限的资源来实践我们常讲的设计思考，还有 Sprint 等方法论的应用，而且他能够协助他的客户来持续的创新。那究竟他是如何透过线上工具和工作坊的技巧来达成这些目标的呢？那马上为你们邀请今天的讲者 Felipe Pontes。
Hello everyone, my name is Felipe. I'm the head of service design magic. So today I'm going to give a lecture about running service design projects and design sprints in Japan. And before I start, I'd like to say that most of the lecture, all of it, is going to be in English, but we're going to have a Q&A after in Mandarin. I'm going to try to speak things relatively fast, so I hope you will be able to understand. But I hope also that the Q&A will be able to solve things, to solve your doubts. And not only that, I'd like to thank a lot MOPCON for this opportunity. We really appreciate being here. So first, a brief introduction about NeuroMagic. So NeuroMagic, until 5 years ago or so, was only a web production company here in Japan, working with big clients to produce websites for them. Mostly that. It has around 90 employees, and but in 2017 I've joined it, and then I've created the service design department. So we started offering consulting projects, right? So here are some of the clients that we have as a web production agency. Usually they're really famous Japanese brands. NeuroMagic has an office in several cities in Japan, like Fukuoka and Okinawa, and now it might open really soon something in Sendai and so. And we also have an office in Amsterdam. Why Amsterdam? Because it's really, it has a lot of good design agencies there that offer really interesting services. So for us, it's good to have this kind of connection with Europe and try to do business there, and also try to help European companies that want to do business here in Japan, usually, if possible, using service design methodologies and approaches. So, like I said before, I'm the head of the service design of NeuroMagic. The department that does that, it's called the Service Design Group. I founded it in April 2017, and we run many things that you might know that are called design sprints. They're usually not the core focus of our projects, but we tend to run them a lot here. And we apply many human-centered methodologies with our clients. So I am from Brazil. I was a journalist before moving to Japan with a scholarship to study my master's degree. And I happen to be certified in 2 design sprint methodologies where I can teach clients to execute it, or I execute it with clients, and so and so. So today also we're going to be joined by Qingying. She's a Taiwanese service designer of our team, a really talented one, by the way, and she's going to help us during the Q&A sessions. So here are some of the clients we already acquired here in Japan. Even though NeuroMagic is not a big company, we've managed to work with some pretty big ones. And this sprints and service design are things that are really new to the Japanese market. So it's unexpected in a good way. We didn't expect to be successful in this sense. And later on, I'm going to talk a bit more about a couple of them. So as for today, we're going to cover a lot of things. I'm going to try to be faster in some parts, because I suppose you might already know some of them. So first I'm going to talk really briefly what is design. Then I'm going to cover what is service design a bit more deeper. I'm going to go through what is design thinking, which I'm sure that most of you already know. I'm going to also cover what is the trouble, the problem with design thinking, explain what is design sprint and what do we do here in Japan in terms of sprinting. And we're going to present some case studies too. So first, what is design? Design is a really complicated word, right? So especially, I mean, here in Japan, many people get confused about its meaning. So I'm going to show here some quotes of famous designers trying to explain what it is. So Steve Jobs, design is not just what it looks like, it feels like. Design is how it works. He's correct, but it's a really vague concept, right? It's not a definition per se. John Maeda, another really famous designer, design is a solution to a problem. He's totally correct, but again, it is kind of still in a way vague. And this one here is my favorite one by Paul Rand, a really famous art director that passed away a couple of years ago. Design is so simple, that's why it's so complicated. And I totally agree with him. Design is really confusing. I can say easily that like most of my family doesn't have a clue about what I do, even though I try to explain them very often. So I believe that design is about knowing who your customer is, how they feel, and making a superior product or service. Although this sounds a bit vague, still, it's better than the other definitions, I believe. And new design fields, they tend to emerge with new technology. So looking a bit back now, like let's try to cover graphic design, industrial design, UI, UX, and service design. So graphic design, you know, it's pretty much self-explanatory. Like you see here, posters, ads, logos, and so and so. And graphic design started to exist in a way after the invention of the printing press, because we had to actually print things, and people need to start thinking about layout of things, right? No one did that before. Everything was done on hand. Industrial design, that is actually the production of like tangible physical goods, you know, and you have to think about how you mass produce these things and so and so. Started with Industrial Revolution, where like people had to think about how to like produce pieces and connect them together and be efficient and so and so. Later on, companies started thinking more like about the shape and making beautiful things and so, but it started as a need to create things, to mass produce things, I would say. And UI UX design, that I'm sure all of you know, it's also self-explanatory. It started with the human-computer interaction, and the first computer was the Xerox Star. That was before the PC, actually. Nah? And in a way, it started like that. Like people started to think, like, have to think how humans would behave interacting with screens, right? And the problem is like, what about service design? Service design is really, really tricky to explain, and it's what we mostly do here in Japan as NeuroMagic. So service design, in a way, is the design of experiences, is what makes companies like Apple and Starbucks so successful, even though they don't have necessarily the best products in the market. So they're much more like, I mean, better coffee shops, at least here in Japan, than Starbucks, with better products, like the coffee is better. But still Starbucks is the leader, clearly. And the same with Apple, you know. Apple products are really loved because they're easy to use. They have a really good service ecosystem. But if you see in terms of like technical components and so, sometimes the Samsung phone or even some Chinese phones are better. So service designers, they have to think about the whole ecosystem, the whole delivery of a service, and try to help companies with that. So I would say that companies like Apple and Starbucks, they're really good at service design, but sometimes they don't call what they do service design. But yeah, that's just like a really broad explanation of it. So you all, I suppose, are like UX experts. So that's how we try to differentiate what we do from what you do. It doesn't mean that we are against each other. It means that we can work together. And also, it doesn't mean just because service design, it's kind of a broader thing. It doesn't mean that it's superior. It's just like service designers, they think about the broad aspect of things, about the big picture, while UX designers usually design the interaction of users and specific touch points. So as service designers, we have also to think, for instance, about the staff experience and operations, people that are actually going to deliver this service. So yeah, usually UX is the experience between one person and a specific touch point. And for like a service designer, we have to worry about the whole ecosystem. That's kind of one of the ways that we try to explain how we see what we do. So here are some service design methods that I suppose that you might have tried or like done some of them. That is persona, journey map, stakeholder map, and service blueprint. I'm going to try to cover them as fast as possible. So first, persona. So persona is a user or customer archetype based on real research. Ideally speaking, we usually like interview a bunch of people, we observe users and so, and then we create really well-informed profiles. So here's an example of one. Here's another one that we did in Japan. As you can see, it doesn't seem to have a lot of information, but actually we put a lot of effort in this. We interviewed a lot of people to reach these profiles. You have journey map, which is the user journey, and usually they're based in a persona, like this one here. So let's say that this guy here, he wants to travel, and this is just a simple journey. I'm not going to go through it. But you can see that there's like the pre-service before the person starts experiencing the service, and you have the post-service too. Right? So as service designers, we think about what people are doing even before the start of the service and what they will do after too. So again, it's a holistic thinking thing. So journey maps, they can really help companies to identify problematic touch points and devise opportunities, see opportunities in like when they're delivering, especially a very complex, long journey service, see if there are problems in what they're doing and if they can make things better in a way. So another really popular tool that we as service designers use is the stakeholder map. So the stakeholder map includes users and stakeholders, like usually organizations or institutions that are delivering this service. So you have, like in this case here of the tourism industry, we have hotel, agency, airline, cantina, diving school, and review website. Again, this is a really vague example just to show what we do. And if needed, you can zoom in and also try to think about internal stakeholders of each service. So one interesting thing is that here in Japan, at least, companies, they're really obsessed with details, and sometimes they get lost in details because they want to make things that are so detailed, like a massively complex stakeholder map, that it ends up not helping them because it's just like too much. So we always try as NeuroMagic to find a balance in this of like doing something that suits our clients' tastes, but at the same time that it's simple enough that it can just like be a more useful tool per se. So this is the basic stakeholder map. You have users, organizations, and usually service providers. You can make things a bit more fancier, a bit more complicated in a way, if needed. But again, like I said before, it is relatively dangerous. You can create something like a value network map that includes the value exchange between parts. Meaning that, like, for instance, this guy here, Yamada-san, he gives like money to the diving school provides him a service, and so and so. So you can map your service, especially if your service is fairly complex, to help your clients, understand what they do. Or you can do also a service ecosystem that is even more complex, that includes systems, IT systems, for instance, that they don't dialogue, they don't talk to people, but they are talking between each other. And even like places like a beach here, but usually we tend to not go that far, especially because of what I said before. And here's my favorite service design tool, that is the blueprint, the service blueprint. So like before I talk about it, you have to, we try to explain like services in their complexity using the theater as a metaphor. So there are many things that are happening behind the scenes when people are actually acting in a play. And so people, they just see the play. And the play would be the service being delivered. But they don't imagine, or they don't have to worry about everything that is going on and that is happening behind the scenes. So this is really, really complex. And so, but so we try, as a company, you have to understand really well everything that happens inside, but the client doesn't. Huh? So there's what we call here the line of visibility. There's the front stage, what is visible to customers, to people, and the backstage, that is hidden. So this is what Disney calls the hidden magic, because people are experiencing only like the front stage now, but you have to put a lot of effort to make that magic happen in a way. And again, as service designers, since we have to think about things holistically, and in projects, depending on the project, we have to interview a lot of like staff to understand what they need and what are the problems they're facing, you know, because they are part of the service delivery. So you have to really understand what is going on. And if a company is delivering a fairly complex service, sometimes even the own company, even managers, they are not sure about like what everyone is going through when delivering something. So we try to make things clearer. When it comes even to a website, there you have the same thing. Like people don't imagine the amount of servers that are like running just to make that service exist. People, they really don't have any clue, but we have, as service experts in a way, UX designers included, we have always to think about that. So finally, what is a blueprint? So a blueprint is a tool that shows you, that helps you to get an end-to-end holistic view of your service and how it's delivered. So it's really important to gather like team alignment and to make stakeholders be on the same page in their understanding of the service. So especially again in big companies that deliver something fairly complex, people from different departments, they think they know what the others are doing. They think they know how everything works, but most of the times, or almost always, they don't. So here's an example of a blueprint. As you can see, it's not a normal user journey. It's much more complex, right? So we have to think about things like users, touch points, staff actions, backstage, and support. Nah? So, and this is over time. Nah? So you don't need to cover all the steps. It really depends. And usually in these workshops, we have to bring people from several different departments to make this together. So a blueprint is tough. It involves a lot of research, a lot of interviews, and experts from different silos. Here's an example of one that the New York police made about like arresting people, about like since like when someone commits the crime and until like the arrest. So there are two types of blueprints, the current state blueprint and the future state blueprint. The current state one you can use to kind of understand what is, how your service currently operates and what are the problems we are facing. I mean, from a front stage perspective or from a backstage perspective. Or you can do a future state blueprint, which is also really interesting. It's a way of prototyping a service. Nah? You can really think in details how this new service, it could be digital or physical, like in a real store, a real shop, how it's going to work and why. So it's an exercise to make people, the experts of our clients, really think about literally everything before actually spending money and building this. So as a conclusion, service design helps experts from different areas talk to each other, dialogue, and actually compile information in a clever way. We usually try to use it to explain it as a common language between parts. So our role is to support our clients to understand each other better, or to understand even their stakeholders, which could be from different companies, better. So the thing is, from a general point of view now, zooming out a bit, countries' economies are relying more and more on services. If you see, for instance, almost 70% of Japan's GDP is based on services. More than 70% of Japan of workers here in Japan are employed in the service sector. I don't know about Taiwan, but it wouldn't surprise me if it's something kind of similar. So that's what we call the service economy. And with the service economy booming, non-designers and companies, they started wanting to be better at understanding people, and they wanted to think like designers to creatively solve problems. So that's something that, and this is like started like a couple of, almost a decade ago or so. And that's when design thinking was born. So I'm sure that you all, almost you all know what is design thinking, so I'm not gonna go through this for a very long time, but design thinking was popularized by IDEO. It's like a creative way of solving problems, and so that you don't need to be a designer to solve this, and so it has a really interesting appeal, I think, and I think it can be really useful. The problem is the way how people use it. So this is the Stanford framework that I'll just go through it, and it's a process that you can always repeat, right? So yeah, it's a really interesting process, but especially here in Japan, we notice that our clients, or when we give like lectures, like in person, you know, pre-corona and so on, people, they get really confused and really nervous. They're not sure if they're using the correct methodology. They don't know for how long they should use those things. They're always afraid, unsure. They don't know, after they finish the workshop, they don't know if it's if they are going to move forward with that. It's more like a thing that people have fun, they feel relaxed, but nothing happens after. It tends to not happen, especially if they're not working with a consultancy like IDEO to support them. So that's the current problem we have here. And there's also this issue that design thinking is not necessarily time boxed. So you never know for how long you should do things now. So it's kind of a complicated thing. So that's the main trouble with design thinking. Design thinking is amazing in many ways, but especially when it comes to like public people that read a book and they want to execute it, they feel confused. They are unsure. So the first thing I would say is not about post-it notes. It's not like because you use post-its that you're going to be more clever and creative, you know, but many people have this idea. So design thinking ends up having this fame of just being a fun thing that doesn't lead to nowhere. And I really like this quote here from a really important manager of IBM, which is really, they have a really strong design thinking methodology, right? So he says pretty much that clients, they really don't care about the methodology you're using. They're only thinking about the outcome. So you have to find a way of making whatever you're doing efficient and you know, and engaging and deliver results, regardless of like the steps and the fancy names and the amount of post-its that you use. And I also really like the quote of Jonathan here. Jonathan is the CEO of a German agency called AJ & Smart, and he sells a lot of design sprints there. He's one of the main experts in design sprints in the world. And he says that design thinking is more like a philosophy, a mindset, instead of an actual methodology. So in his words, a design sprint, which I'm going to explain now, it's in a way a recipe. So that's the whole point of it. So finally, what is a design sprint? So a design sprint is a workshop that usually have 2 to 4 days. You have to do some research, you do some ideation, you prototype and test things. It has like lean startup methodologies, design thinking methodologies, and sometimes even some service design methods too there. So the whole thing here is like how a company normally launches a service, right? They have an idea, they build this idea, they launch this idea, and then they collect data to see, especially in apps, like to see if the idea is good enough, right? The problem is it takes some time to build. Sometimes it takes more time to build than you imagine. And if you're like a small company, it can kill your business, right? It can be dangerous. So design thinking has this startup approach that you have an idea and you collect data before you actually invest time in it. Nah? So that's the whole thing of a design sprint, I'm sorry. So there are two methodologies of design sprints. One is what we call at NeuroMagic the product design sprint. So the product design sprint is the Google sprint that like it was popularized a few years ago. That's the book in Chinese. And it's to come up with an idea of a product, usually a digital product, or a new feature of an application, and to test it only in like 4 to 5 days. In this case, 5 days here. But this is, yeah. So it was created by this guy here called Jake Knapp. So he was a designer at Google Ventures, which is the venture capital arm of Google. So he was assisting startups that Google invested to create new services, usually digital, usually involving applications or websites, or even AI, by the way, robots and stuff like that. Or like, so he was only like running these workshops all the time with clients. And after he ran like over 100, he came up with his own methodology. He checked what was really efficient and good enough to test, to have ideas and test them. And so later on, he branched out. He launched his book, which was called Sprint, this one here, and got super famous. And I happened to be trained by him in Germany. He's this guy here, a really tall guy. This is Jonathan, a guy that I cited beforehand, and this is me with a shorter hair. And this is a Totoro that I gave to Jonathan. Totoro is a really famous Japanese character, by the way. So that's the product design sprint, right? It's the one that I suppose that some of you probably already heard. It's really heavily based on digital products. And yeah, here in Japan, we run something called the service design sprint. So what is the service design sprint? It's a 3 to 4 day workshop that we have a lot of like service design things in the middle. It's almost like a service design packed like express consultancy. So we have a broader issue to tackle. So the solutions end up also a bit like broader. We don't actually like prototype a real service or so. We come up more with suggestions of things to be done, but we make the sprint participants do a lot of interviews, build personas, build journeys, or depending on the case, we can also make them build like stakeholder maps or other tools that I've showed you. Blueprint, though, it's a bit more complicated. So the creator of the service design sprint is a guy called Teni Pinheiro. Like me, he's Brazilian, so he's kind of my mentor. I worked with him on his first book around 10 years ago in Brazil, which was the first book in design thinking, about design thinking in Brazil. And he was back then the CEO of LiveWork. LiveWork is one of the first service design agencies in the world, and it's from UK. So he did like several projects as a consultant, got tired, and then he decided to create his own service design sprint. So like I said before, it's pretty much, we try to do many things related, involving service design methodologies, but in 3 to 4 days only. So the scope of the projects is more limited, but this methodology ends up being quite popular here in Japan. Because sometimes service design projects, they can get too long or too expensive and they want to test this. So usually we use this almost as a onboarding for clients if they want to know what we do better, so they can have kind of a taste of it and solve a problem at the same time. So I'm gonna cover now some of our case studies. The first one, so first, like, just to broadly explain, we do 4 things mostly here in Japan. We do design sprints, which can have 2 to 4 days. We do employee training, which we actually create design sprints for our clients, and every sprint is different. We actually come up with a new methodology with different exercises and so. We can run workshops that they range from 2 to 4 hours, or like sometimes a bit more, and they tend to be more educational. Since this is fairly new here in Japan, I have the impression, due maybe to language barrier, because I've been to Taiwan before, and I have the impression that in Taiwan, people are more familiar and more comfortable with English. So they read more things from abroad. And so here in Japan, it's a bit trickier. So we give these like very basic lessons, even to some big companies that sometimes they don't know what is design thinking or sprint. So it's really interesting. And we also do consultancy projects. So far, since NeuroMagic is not like a massive company, like in terms of scope, really, really big, we can do projects that are, here it says from 1 to 2 months, but we did a bit like 4 months or so. So yeah, there's like a scope thing that we always have to think about. So, like I said before, the design sprint, which I explained beforehand. This case study here about Toshiba was really interesting. It will probably help you to understand what we did and why it's different from the product design sprint, the Google sprint. So it was an issue between two departments of Toshiba, the design center, which hired us, and the business unit. They deliver some really complex projects together, right? But there's a lot of miscommunication between them. Sometimes the business people, they don't know exactly what the designers do or what the designers are capable and what they aren't capable of delivering, and vice versa. So there's just like a massive miscommunication. The designers were really frustrated because the business people were always selling the same projects, usually related to infrastructure, because like Toshiba builds, you know, elevators and other like really complicated machinery, even for roadways, also machineries like involving like car speed detection, or like they don't do only consumer goods now. And the designers wanted to do more things like that, different things, but they couldn't. And there was like a bit of problem of respect also in there. So we built a team with around 15 people. I think around 10 were designers, 5 were business. They were all pretty high level executives. We made them interview their own colleagues. Usually we made the designers interview the business people and the business people interview the designers, not from the same team, from like people that weren't joining the sprint. And then they built their own personas. We built 3 personas of each department, and we actually created a massively complex, you can see there on the background, journey of these like different departments working together, and with several lanes. It was almost like a service blueprint in a way, and we started identifying problems they had, especially problems of communication, you know, between like these in these specific steps. There were like frictions. So we circled them. You can see probably there on the back which one that were the most problematic, and then we started prototyping something. So the final prototype here was a type of presentation they should make to each other every once in a while. They should do to each other. So that was the main thing. It was not a product. It was not even a service. It was just like a human problem. And the solution was also human. It was just like things like, hey, in the beginning of the project, don't forget to do this, 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 and that, and so on. In the middle too, and in the end too. So we created even like a template they should follow through. And we tested it with very important executives of Toshiba, like really extremely high level people. So that was it was an interesting case, I believe. The second one is related to Sony, so a Sony bank. So they have a currency service, and I suppose that you all must be more familiar with this way more than me. So they deliver like, they have an application, they have a website, and they wanted to make their currency service, currency conversion or acquisition of foreign currencies more smooth, the process, because here in Japan, at least, the legislation is so complex that people, they tend to quit. They find the website, and when they're going to sign up, it has like just like too many windows, or especially here in Japan, people tend to be extremely cautious about what they do. So it's scary. They end up quitting and just buying foreign currency in a more traditional way, per se. So we mixed elements from both design sprints here. We used at the very beginning some service design sprint things like personas and customer journeys to map how things were currently done. And then we had a really big ideation session with important members of Sony Bank, so they could come up with solutions. So most of the participants here, they happen to be UX designers. So this activity was really smooth because they knew what they wanted to achieve, and they were really clear about that, really like confident in a positive way. In the end, we used the help of like external partners to test these solutions we came up with, and they actually, after the sprint, they started developing it. And it's interesting, as you can see, this was like what, like 3 to 4 days activity, and actually generated something tangible, something that they might have taken like months to do it. So sprints can be really efficient depending on the situation. This here was a very unusual sprint. It was for a company called Dentsu Tech, that is a parent company of Dentsu, which is a massive ad agency here in Japan and all over the world, I suppose. So they had a service they wanted to launch. I mean, they were about to launch it, but still when it comes to the marketing strategy, two really important leaders of the marketing department, they didn't agree on some key points. So we as Neuro Magic, we designed a 2 days of 4 hours workshop to go through the whole marketing strategy, how they should market that together. Like there were like most of the participants here, almost all, were from the marketing department. So it was a marketing-based discussion to reach specific conclusions about like what they should do and why, and to be on the same page about the value proposition, what are like important factors like selling points of our service and why, what should be careful and things like that. So it was really, really interesting. And we, in the end, like I said, like a few minutes ago, like what we do as service designers, as design sprint facilitators, like we help people. We don't come up with this for them. We just like facilitate the whole conversation. We come up with a common language and we make people get to the same page, really understand each other. And that's really important, especially when it comes to countries like Japan. I don't know how it's in Taiwan, if it's similar or if it's more open-minded, where departments are really separated from each other, or even in this case, people from the same department, they really didn't understand each other and they weren't talking about this and so and so. So we help them to come up with conclusions. Here, as you can see, we define with them marketing goals, some problems and desires of their customers, value proposition, which channels they should use to promote this new service and why. Other thing that we really do a lot here in Japan is like employee training. Like I said before, we create design sprints for our clients. And this case study here was one of our first, was with NTT. As you may know, it's a really massive company, not only here in Japan, but all over the world. So their UX design team wanted to start co-creating services with clients. So they wanted to do more B2B activities, which they already do. NTT already has the technology to implement these systems, but sometimes they were missing the point. They were making and delivering many things their customers didn't want to. So we created a design sprint for them to actually co-create things with their clients and then pitch something more clear, something that they knew that their clients would want. So we trained them. It was like around 3 days. It was clearly before Corona, so we could actually see each other, like, and it was really interesting. It was really interesting. And here are some examples of like some exercises that we create for our clients. Like this one is called Time Machine. We provide even the materials, they're branded with like their logo type and their colors. We created a persona template for them to run during a sprint, user journey template too. And in the end, we certify them. That's something that is really important here in Japan, to certify your clients. It's something that is really valued. We did really recently with a company that unfortunately I can't talk about it. We trained them remotely on Zoom. It was around 15 UI UX people too. So this is a big, massive maker of like electronic gadgets here in Japan. And it was super interesting. It was a very tough experience too. Like it was one of the first times we were doing it. So to train people, like 15 people at the same time, we needed around 4 facilitators, including Lynn, that will be really soon here on the Q&A session. And we had to rehearse like several times. It was pretty much a war operation. We used, in this case, a software called Miro, M-I-R-O, not Muro, that M-U-R-A-L. Miro is our choice, our software to go. And there were several challenges. Like we had to add way more like tips. We had to change the exercises, the length of the exercises. So it was a massive, really big Corona lesson that we had to take. And I can definitely talk more about it during the Q&A if you have any questions, especially about this case here. But it was very, very tough, like with a lot of materials to bridge the gap, you know, because when you work with someone in person, it's much easier to explain things and to show things, but remotely is more challenging, definitely. And workshop, just to show you some examples, we used to work a lot with Cartier here, teaching them personas and customer journeys. As you know, this is a luxury brand, so for them it's really important to focus on the experience of the users. And so sometimes we're kind of partners. They call us every once in a while, and we support them with those like minor educational projects or to facilitate some meetings, I would say, depending on the case. And we also offer consultancy projects. This one here was for a hospital and an IV drip maker here in Japan. So we try to interview users, usually people that are really debilitated with really serious diseases, like that used this drip. And we interviewed a bunch of them, came up with several service design tools here. You can see stakeholder map, personas, and journeys, and so and so. And we run a design sprint in the end to prototype and test this IV drip. So it was very interesting. We are almost running out of time. I will be more than glad to answer questions about like anything, especially the case studies. Feel free to reach us out. And once again, thank you very, very much for your support.
好，那谢谢大家的聆听哦。那其实我们今天也有跟讲者特地连线到，就是远在日本的讲者。那现场的话，我们可以及时的问他问题。那想要询问一下，接下来就是我们的 Q&A 时间。那有没有人针对设计思考或者是讲者 Felipe 所提到的冲刺计划有任何问题的，可以举手，我们可以跟讲者互动这样子。哦，好，有一位。好，请稍等一下哦。我们现场也是有翻译，所以用中文提问也是 OK 的哦。
所以大家如果有任何问题的话，都可以问哦。
OK， 所以这样听得到我们的声音吗？
可以，没有问题。
可以吗？好，那请问刚刚是哪一位会众想要提问？好，请稍等我一下。
Hello, I have a question. As you said, people in the same department may not know each other. Maybe they work together all day long, but they are not close to each other. May I ask how to be close to each other? That's my question. Thank you very much.
Hi, thank you for the questions. So the question is about like working together as a service.
Yes. Take me for example. I work with some people in the same office all day long, but I find we are not close to each other. In your workshop, you said that you have some method to make people close to each other. I want to know, can you tell me how? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now I got it. So the important thing is like, first you have to choose a methodology. The design sprint book is open source. You can just buy it or download it, and then but you have to pick a team. Like, so if I were you, I would find first a problem that colleagues from different departments are interested in tackling. And then you have like a common goal to achieve. And if I were you, I would handpick people that are really interested in joining the activities, so they could be kind of like together. One big problem that happens with design thinking in design sprints is that, like, how can I say? Is that there are many people that join these activities, but they don't want to be there. They don't want to tackle it. So that's like, it's a very complicated thing. So if you can avoid that, it's good. So it's important to try to find a common goal. And at least to have, I think it's almost impossible to have participants, everyone that loves the challenge and want to be there, but at least have like the majority of people. Because what usually happens is that even people that are uninterested in the beginning, they end up kind of liking it in the end. That's the, it's not, I mean, it doesn't happen always, but it happens many times. So try to find people that are motivated. And in order to do that, you have to find something they want to solve. So yeah, to find a common goal, I would say, it's really important.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
好，那在场会众还有任何人想要提问的吗？哦，好，好。
我可以讲中文吗？好，就是想请问一下，你是怎么怎么说服客户跟你合作？因为在设计的，就是在用户体验设计的这个成效跟成果，可能需要一个比较长时间的验证。就是你怎么跟客户沟通，就是能够说服他们，一起去，就是去举办这个 workshop， 或者是就是公司的一个证书方面的那个对活动这样。
好，那不好意思，那我来帮忙翻译一下这一段。So, Felipe, the question is how do you convince your clients to do the workshop, to run the workshop with, because sometimes doing the user experience takes a lot of time to validate your products. So what kind of methodology you use, or how do you convince your clients to run the workshop with you? So that's the question.
Thank you for the question. I think the first thing is, of course, showing case studies. If you're really starting to do this, you should like borrow case studies from famous designers, or you can find online many pages like with really good case studies. One is called sprintstories.com. And the other one, what we always do, usually before a sprint, we give like 2 brainstorming sessions with the client to define a challenge. And this for them is really interesting. So like we work with them together a bit. So during the brainstorm session, which we usually offer for free, they can get a kind of a taste of how we work. And it tends to work out. It works out really often.
谢谢 ，Thank you。
有需要翻译成中文吗？还是没问题？可以
OK， 没有问题，谢谢。
OK。
好，那还有没有会众有任何问题 ？OK， 好，那我们再开放一位。
Hello, I'm interested in the case of remote design sprint. What is the major problem in organizing such a remote design sprint, and how to overcome it?
Felipe, did you get the question?
Okay.
No, I was muted. I don't know why.
Okay, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay, sound.
可以听得见吗？我们现在的声音。
Hello.
好，请稍等一下哈。
Hello. Can you listen to me?
哦，现在有听得到吗
Hello.
好。
Hi. So, Lynn, can you talk to me? Maybe you can ask the question because I didn't hear them.
Okay. So 不好意思，可以请你再问一次就是再问一次，因为好像刚刚有点断续，没有听得很清楚。
好，现在听得到声音吗 ？Can you hear that？
现在可以听得到。
Okay, I'm interested in the case of the remote design sprint. What's the major challenge and how to overcome it?
So Felipe, the question is, what is he's interested about the remote design sprint case. So what's the major challenge in the sprints? The major challenge.
The major challenge is the number of participants. In our case, we had to train 15 people at the same time, and it worked out, but it is a logistical nightmare. Like, I had 5 facilitators, including one person just to manage the technical things. Like, it was very tough. So I would suggest you, even, it doesn't need to be a training session, but if you do something like just to tackle a problem, try to run a sprint with like up to 5 people. I'm sorry, up to 7. No more than that. Otherwise, it's really tough to organize everything. It's really tough. And you need one facilitator that really knows how all technical things work. And yeah, like Zoom, Miro, or Miro, and so on. And you need to rehearse it a lot of times before. It's really recommended. Right. Thank you for the question. So Lynn, I don't know why I'm really not listening to the microphone in the auditorium. To me here, it says that it's muted.
Okay, I will help you with that.
好，在场会中还有任何人有任何问题的吗？我们这边最后一题，有吗 ？OK。
就是第一阶段不是都会做那个 persona 的调查，那怎么样才会知道说调查的问题已经够了，可以进到下一个阶段了？
你是说通常第一个阶做市场调查，你的
就是会做那个 persona 的调查，那不是会问很多使用者的问题？那怎么样才会知道说我问的问题已经足够我去想下一个阶段了？
你说在interview 这个使用者的时候的那些问题吗 ？Okay, so the question is when we are building the persona, so how do you know that the interview question is enough for the next stage? So how do you judge that?
That's a good point. Usually we take a good time like preparing the questions. We provide at least to our clients a list of like good practices, like don't forget to ask this specific type of questions, ask this kind of questions, ignore the other type of questions. When it comes to the number of interviewers, it's really tricky. But for a design sprint, we have to go fast. So we had to kind of like guess a specific kind of a like up to 10 people and hope that it will work out. So if you're doing this, because we are consultants, so we are using our clients' time and we have to be really mindful of that. But if you're doing a sprint for your own company, and if you think the interviews are not good enough, you can kind of redo them before you build the persona. But we try to do things in a way that it's like only a few interviews and that are efficient even so.
OK， 那谢谢 Felipe， 还有我们的翻译。对，那our Q&A session is ended. So thank you all, really appreciate. 大家可以给他们一个掌声吗？对，非常的荣幸哦。